Have you ever felt like being alone is a curse? What if I told you that solitude is actually your greatest weapon? That the moments when nobody is watching are the moments where your true power is forged? Today, we're uncovering why being alone isn't loneliness. It's the secret to clarity, discipline, and unstoppable growth. Solitude reveals purpose because purpose cannot compete with noise. When you are surrounded by opinions, expectations, comparisons, and constant stimulation, your inner voice gets drowned out. Most people think confusion comes from lack of information, but confusion usually comes from too much input. Solitude removes the interference. It strips life down to what matters and exposes what has always been there but ignored. When you are alone, you stop performing. You stop pretending. You stop adjusting yourself to fit into rooms that were never designed for your calling. In solitude, you are forced to face your true desires, not the ones borrowed from society, family pressure, or social approval. Purpose does not announce itself in crowds because crowds reward conformity, not originality. Solitude creates space for honesty, and honesty is the foundation of purpose. You begin to notice patterns in your thoughts, recurring ideas, unresolved passions, and the things that energize you without external reward. Solitude also exposes what you are not meant to carry. Certain ambitions fall away, certain goals lose their appeal, and certain paths reveal themselves as distractions rather than destinations. When you are alone long enough, clarity replaces confusion, not because life becomes easier, but because direction becomes sharper. Purpose is discovered when you are no longer trying to impress anyone, please anyone, or compete with anyone. Solitude removes the mask and introduces you to yourself, and you cannot live intentionally until you understand who you are when no one is watching. Isolation builds discipline, because discipline cannot be developed in comfort or constant company. Discipline is the ability to govern yourself when no one is enforcing rules, applauding effort, or correcting behavior. When people are always around, responsibility is often shared, accountability is external, and standards become negotiable. Isolation removes those crutches. It forces you to become your own supervisor. Your routines are no longer maintained by pressure, but by conviction. Your habits are no longer shaped by schedules given to you, but by decisions made within you. Isolation exposes weakness quickly because there is no distraction to hide behind. Procrastination becomes obvious. Laziness becomes loud. Inconsistency has nowhere to escape. At the same time, isolation provides the environment where discipline can grow without interruption. Repetition becomes easier. Focus becomes deeper. You begin to understand the cost of your time and the value of structure. Discipline is not punishment, it is alignment. Isolation teaches you that freedom is not the absence of rules, but the mastery of self-control. When you are isolated, you learn how to wake up without motivation, work without supervision, and persist without encouragement. This is where endurance is formed. This is where resilience becomes internal instead of dependent on external pressure. Isolation trains you to act based on principle rather than mood. It removes emotional dependency and replaces it with inner authority. Over time, discipline becomes identity. You no longer rely on inspiration to act because consistency has taken its place. Isolation hardens resolve, strengthens focus, and conditions the mind to obey vision rather than comfort, to move forward even when there is no immediate reward, no recognition, and no guarantee, creating a foundation that cannot be shaken when pressure increases and expectations rise. Silence sharpens vision because vision is weakened by constant reaction. When every sound demands a response, when every notification interrupts thought, when every opinion pulls attention in a different direction, sight becomes blurred. Silence removes the urgency to react and replaces it with the ability to observe. In silence, you stop responding to life and start interpreting it. You notice what truly aligns with your values and what merely competes for attention. Vision is not about seeing more. It is about seeing clearly. Silence creates distance between impulse and decision. It slows the mind enough for insight to emerge. When noise is removed, patterns become visible. You begin to recognize what consistently moves you forward and what repeatedly pulls you backward. Silence allows imagination to function without interference. It gives your mind permission to explore possibilities without being limited by other people's doubts or expectations. In silence, long-term thinking replaces short-term emotion. You begin to think in years instead of moments. Vision requires patience, and patience is cultivated in quiet environments. Silence also reveals truth. Many people stay busy to avoid confronting what they already know. Silence removes that escape. It brings unresolved thoughts to the surface and forces you to deal with them. This confrontation is not comfortable, but it is necessary. Clarity is often preceded by discomfort. In silence, you gain the ability to listen inwardly. You learn the difference between fear and caution, between desire and distraction, between intuition and impulse. Vision becomes refined because it is no longer influenced by constant comparison. You stop measuring your progress against others and start measuring it against purpose. Silence strengthens discernment. It trains the mind to filter information instead of absorbing everything. Over time, you become less reactive, more intentional, and more precise in your decisions. Vision becomes stable because it is rooted in understanding rather than emotion. Silence does not eliminate challenges, but it equips you to see them accurately instead of exaggerating them. When vision is sharp, direction becomes obvious, and energy is no longer wasted on paths that lead nowhere. Separation protects destiny because not every connection is meant to last through every season. Destiny requires an environment that supports growth, and some environments suffocate potential rather than nurture it. Separation creates space for alignment. It removes influences that dilute commitment, weaken standards, and compromise values. Many people confuse loyalty with obligation and familiarity with purpose. Separation breaks that confusion. It forces you to evaluate relationships based on direction rather than history. Destiny is sensitive in its early stages. It cannot survive constant criticism, distraction, or misalignment. Separation acts as a shield, allowing growth to happen without unnecessary interference. When you separate, you gain perspective. Distance reveals the true impact of certain people and situations. You begin to see which connections bring clarity and which create confusion. Separation also strengthens identity. When you are no longer defined by group expectations, you discover who you are independent of approval. This independence is critical for destiny because purpose demands conviction. Separation is not about isolation from humanity, but alignment with vision. It is about choosing influence intentionally rather than absorbing it passively. Destiny requires focus, and focus demands boundaries. Separation establishes those boundaries. It teaches you to say no without guilt and yes without hesitation. Many opportunities are lost not because of lack of ability, but because of misplaced associations. Separation reduces noise, pressure, and unnecessary comparison. It allows energy to be invested where it matters most. When you separate, growth accelerates because resources are no longer divided. Emotional energy, mental focus, and time are redirected toward what truly matters. Separation also prepares you for higher responsibility. As destiny expands, access must become limited. Not everyone can handle the weight of your calling. Separation ensures that only those aligned with purpose remain close enough to influence decisions. It protects momentum by eliminating friction. It preserves integrity by removing compromise. Over time, separation builds strength, clarity, and stability, ensuring that when destiny fully unfolds, it stands on a foundation that has been guarded, refined, and strengthened through intentional distance. Self-leadership is born alone because leadership of others is impossible without first mastering leadership of self. Many people aspire to influence the world, to command teams, or to inspire movements, yet they fail to understand that the ability to lead externally is a reflection of the mastery developed internally. When you are alone, there is no one to blame, no one to guide, no one to prop you up. You are confronted with your habits, your decisions, your weaknesses, and your patterns of thought. In this space, self-discipline is tested, priorities are clarified, and integrity is examined. Self-leadership begins when you recognize that the external world will not create your structure, will not enforce your accountability, and will not validate your vision. You must become your own mentor, your own critic, and your own motivator. In solitude, decisions cannot be deferred, actions cannot be avoided, and responsibility cannot be shifted. Every choice, every failure, every victory is yours alone. And this ownership develops clarity of mind and strength of character. Alone, you learn to manage your time, your energy, and your emotions without external influence. You begin to recognize which patterns serve your growth and which patterns hinder it. You also learn the power of consistency, that small, deliberate actions repeated over time create results that no external pressure could produce. Self-leadership cultivated in isolation creates confidence that is unshakable, vision that is unblurred, and resilience that is unbreakable. You learn to navigate discomfort, to confront fear, and to pursue purpose even when the world offers no support or applause. Alone, you discover that the most influential leader is not the loudest, not the most popular, not the most recognized, but the one who can govern themselves with unwavering clarity and uncompromising standards. Leadership of self is the foundation of all influence. An influence of others without self-leadership is hollow, temporary, and fragile. Greatness requires distance because proximity often compromises growth. Many people underestimate the subtle ways in which closeness can erode potential. When you are constantly surrounded by familiar voices, habitual environments, and limiting perspectives, your mind adjusts to conformity rather than expansion. Distance creates space for reflection, for focus, and for clarity. It allows you to step outside the gravitational pull of opinion, expectation, and distraction and see the path ahead with unclouded vision. Greatness is not built in the echo chamber of approval. It is built in the quiet corridors where ideas are tested against principle, not popularity. Distance also protects integrity. When you are too close to influences that challenge your values, compromise becomes easy and boundaries become negotiable. Greatness cannot survive diluted standards, and distance establishes the conditions for maintaining them. Physical separation often translates into mental separation, a freedom to prioritize long-term goals over short-term satisfaction, to act from conviction rather than convenience, to pursue purpose rather than immediate comfort. Distance reveals who and what truly matters. Some relationships, opportunities, and environments are meant to be temporary. They serve a purpose, but they are not intended to carry you through every season. Recognizing this is essential for achieving lasting impact. Greatness is also forged through introspection, and introspection requires space. Without distance, the noise of external demands prevents the mind from discerning the critical from the trivial. You cannot refine vision, sharpen skill, or strengthen character if you are constantly reacting to others' expectations. Distance challenges you to depend less on validation and more on conviction, less on applause and more on principle, less on crowd support and more on internal direction. Over time, distance builds resilience. You learn to operate independently, to make decisions without consensus, and to persevere when the immediate world does not recognize your worth. It teaches patience because results are seldom instantaneous, and discipline because focus is sustained without constant reinforcement. Distance creates a climate where greatness can mature undisturbed, where the seeds of potential are nurtured, and where the individual becomes capable of standing firm, thinking clearly, and acting decisively when the world finally comes to witness the power that was quietly cultivated in separation. Being alone reveals your purpose, builds your discipline, sharpens your vision, and protects your destiny. It teaches self-leadership, strengthens your character, and positions you to achieve greatness on your own terms. The world may try to distract you, influence you, or pull you away, but the real power lies in learning to stand alone, think clearly, and act decisively. Remember, solitude isn't a setback. It's the starting point of your strength, your clarity, and your destiny.